I felt heat rush to my face, not just from shame but from fury. Pregnant? The wedding hall was glowing, laughter echoing, music floating, until the groom opened his mouth. His words sliced through the air like broken glass, and within seconds, 300 guests were frozen in stunned silence. When people talk about the perfect couple, they usually picture someone else's highlight reel, smiling photos, choreographed dances, Instagram captions about soulmates. That's how people saw us. My name is Claire Bennett, and for almost 3 years I was engaged to Ethan Hayes. He was tall, charming in the way that made waitresses blush, and had a smile so disarming it could sell ice in the Arctic. He worked in finance, dressed sharp, and carried himself like the kind of man who always knew where he was going. I was the quieter one, the steady presence in his whirlwind. My friends teased me for being the lucky one, the girl who caught the golden boy. From the outside, everything about our wedding looked like a fairy tale in the making. The invitations embossed with gold lettering, the rehearsal dinner under fairy lights, the carefully selected playlist we'd argued about for weeks but finally agreed on. Even the venue, a renovated estate on the outskirts of town, was something people whispered about when they saw the photos online. Our families adored the match. My parents, middle class and cautious, saw Ethan as the son-in-law they'd prayed for. His family, wealthier and more image-conscious, welcomed me warmly enough, though I always sensed a subtle edge, as though they wanted me polished just a little shinier to match their world. The weeks before the ceremony were a blur of fittings and tastings and final payments. Ethan was always busy, often too busy, but he made the right gestures, sending flowers when he missed an appointment, texting me, "Can't wait to marry you," in the middle of his late nights at the office. I told myself this was love in the real world. Messy, hectic, but solid at the core. Still, there were cracks I pretended not to see. The way Ethan sometimes dismissed my ideas with a laugh, only to later present them as his own to others. The way his phone was always face down on the table, buzzing with messages he never explained. The way his mother once told me, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, "You'll learn that Hayes men have their eccentricities." I ignored it. Because love is compromise, right? And because the closer the wedding got, the more I convinced myself that all relationships had shadows. On the morning of the ceremony, the estate gleamed like a painting. White roses wound around the arch where we would exchange vows. Guests in tailored suits and dresses clinked glasses of champagne. My bridesmaids fluttered around me, adjusting veils and retouching makeup. The air buzzed with excitement, the kind that makes your chest tight with anticipation. As I stood before the mirror, I barely recognized the woman staring back at me. The silk gown, the pinned hair, the trembling smile. For a moment, I let myself believe the illusion, that this was the happiest day of my life, that the man waiting at the altar was the man who would guard my heart forever. But behind the applause, the toasts, the laughter, there was a tension I couldn't name. Something in Ethan's smile when he greeted guests, too sharp. Something in the way his sister kept watching me like she knew a secret. Something in the pit of my stomach whispering that perfection, when it looks this polished, is often hiding a fracture line. And it was that fracture line that would split wide open before the night was over, leaving the entire room in stunned silence. The ceremony itself passed like a dream. Rows of faces turned toward me as I walked down the aisle, the string quartet's music swelling. Ethan's smile was movie perfect, the kind of grin that made half the women in the audience sigh audibly. We exchanged vows under the arch of roses, kissed to a chorus of applause, and for a few fleeting minutes, I allowed myself to believe that the unease I'd been carrying was nothing more than nerves. But the warning signs didn't wait long. It began during the photos. My bridesmaids and I were laughing between such *TS when I noticed Ethan step away, his phone pressed tightly to his ear. His jaw was tense, his voice low. He glanced over his shoulder at me and quickly turned away. When I asked later who had called, he brushed it off with a careless, "Just work." But no one from his office would dare interrupt his wedding day. At the reception, the unease grew louder. Guests filled the ballroom, chandeliers glittering overhead, waiters weaving through the crowd with trays of champagne. Toasts flowed freely, each one painting us as the couple of the year. But while I floated from table to table, smiling and thanking people, I caught Ethan's sister, Lila, watching me with an expression I couldn't decode. Part pity, part anticipation, as if she was bracing for something I didn't yet know. During dinner, it happened again. Ethan excused himself, slipping outside for air. He was gone long enough that people started whispering. When he returned, his tie was loosened, his eyes a little too bright, and his hand trembled slightly as he raised his glass for a toast. It wasn't just him. Subtler things added to the gnawing in my chest. My new mother-in-law leaned over during dinner and said, with a kind of smile that slices, "Enjoy the night, dear. Marriage has a way of teaching us lessons quickly." She clinked her glass against mine before I could respond. Then there was the missing speech. Ethan's best man, his childhood friend, was supposed to stand and share a few words. But when the DJ called his name, he shook his head, pale and stiff, muttering that he'd changed his mind. The air shifted then, uneasily, as though half the room sensed something was wrong, but no one wanted to be the one to say it. I tried to drown the whispers with laughter, with dancing, with the shallow cheer of small talk. But the cracks were there now, impossible to ignore. Every time I looked at Ethan, I saw a man balancing on the edge of something sharp, his smile stretched too thin, his eyes darting too often. The first warning bell wasn't a single event. It was a collection of glances, of silences, of whispers, tiny fissures in the facade of perfection. And though I tried to keep smiling for the cameras, for the guests, for myself, I knew deep down what that bell meant. Something was coming. And when it arrived, it wouldn't just ruin a wedding. It would shatter everything. The reception was supposed to be the easiest part. Eat, drink, dance, smile. That's what everyone kept telling me in the weeks leading up to the wedding. But as the night stretched on, the pressure only grew heavier, wrapping itself around me like a vice I couldn't shake. It started on the dance floor. Couples spun and swayed under the golden lights, but Ethan wasn't by my side. He slipped in and out of the crowd, vanishing for long stretches of time, reappearing with that strained smile and half-hearted excuses. I danced with uncles, cousins, friends, anyone who asked, but all the while I felt the burning absence of my new husband. Each time I glanced around the room, I caught sight of him at the edge of the crowd, speaking in low tones to his sister or sending texts with furious speed. I tried to ignore it, tried to cling to the music, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. But people weren't subtle. When I passed by certain tables, conversations hushed. My bridesmaids exchanged looks when they thought I wasn't watching. Even my own parents seemed oddly restrained, avoiding my questions with overly bright smiles. The sense of isolation crept in slowly, like water seeping under a locked door. When I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, I overheard snippets I wasn't meant to hear. One guest whispered to another, "Do you think she knows?" The reply came, soft but sharp, "Not yet. But she will." My stomach twisted. I wanted to march up and demand answers, but pride kept me rooted. I wasn't about to create a scene at my own wedding, not without proof. So I walked back inside, past the eyes that followed me, past the smiles that felt more like masks than warmth. Even Ethan's behavior grew harder to excuse. When I caught him by the bar, I asked softly, "Are you okay?" He nodded too quickly, pressing a kiss to my forehead like a man pacifying a child. "Of course," he said. "Just a lot going on. Don't worry." But the way his hands gripped the counter told me otherwise. Then came the strangest moment of all, my dance with his father. Tradition dictated it, and I accepted his hand reluctantly. He led me across the floor, moving stiffly, his eyes never quite meeting mine. Halfway through, he muttered under his breath, "I told him this was a mistake." I blinked, stunned, asking what he meant, but he only tightened his jaw and shook his head. "Forget it," he said, and the rest of the dance passed in strained silence. By the time dessert was served, I felt like a ghost at my own wedding. Everyone else seemed in on a secret I couldn't touch. Lila's eyes followed me constantly, Ethan's smiles rang hollow, and the warmth I had expected to carry me through this night evaporated, leaving me exposed. The isolation was no longer subtle. It was complete. Surrounded by hundreds of people, I had never felt more alone. And beneath it all, a single thought screamed in the back of my mind, they know something I don't. And whatever it is, it's about to destroy me. The speeches were supposed to be the highlight of the evening. People had warned me, "You'll cry, you'll laugh, you'll never forget them." And they were right, though not in the way anyone imagined. The maid of honor spoke first, her voice warm, eyes shimmering as she recalled childhood memories we shared. The room softened, and for a fleeting second, I let myself breathe. Maybe the unease was all in my head. Maybe this night really could be what I dreamed. Then Ethan stood. He didn't need the microphone. His voice carried, sharper than the champagne flutes ringing around the room. At first, he smiled, too wide, too rehearsed, as he thanked the guests. I forced myself to hold his gaze, hoping to find comfort in it. But the comfort never came, because then he said it. "With all of you here as witnesses," Ethan began, his hand tightening around the stem of his glass, "I think it's time the truth finally comes out." A murmur rippled through the hall. Forks clinked against plates. My skin prickled. Ethan continued, his words like stones dropping into water, one after another, unstoppable. "My bride, the woman sitting here beside me in white, hasn't been honest. Not with me. Not with any of you." I felt the ground tilt beneath me. "Ethan, what are you?" But he silenced me with a raised hand, his smile razor thin. "You see, while we've all been celebrating, she's been keeping a little secret. And tonight feels like the perfect time to share it." The room froze. Every head turned toward me. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, thundering louder than the clatter of someone dropping their fork. Then Ethan delivered the final blow. "She's pregnant. And it isn't mine." Silence. Utter, suffocating silence. For a full 10 seconds, the ballroom felt like it had been plunged underwater. No one moved. No one breathed. Then, as though a spell had broken, whispers erupted. Guests leaned into each other, gasping, murmuring, hands flying to mouths. I felt heat rush to my face, not just from shame but from fury. Pregnant? Not his. It was a lie. A cruel, deliberate lie. And the fact that he said it with such confidence made my blood run cold. I opened my mouth to defend myself, but Ethan wasn't finished. "You've all been fooled, but not me. I've known for weeks. Tonight, I wanted everyone else to know too." He set his glass down with a sharp clink, his eyes locked on mine, daring me to deny it. I glanced at Lila. She wasn't shocked. If anything, she looked smug, her lips curling into the faintest smile. That's when it hit me. This had been planned. Not a drunken outburst, not a slip of the tongue, but a calculated ambush. My parents stared, wide-eyed, torn between disbelief and pity. His parents avoided my gaze altogether. And the guests, oh, the guests drank it in like wildfire, their whispers multiplying until the noise was unbearable. I wanted to scream, to demand proof, to shatter the lie right then and there. But my voice caught in my throat. Ethan had stolen it, along with my dignity. The revelation wasn't just a false accusation. It was a P*N. And he had chosen the one moment when I was most vulnerable, the one stage where the world was watching, to unleash it. And though I knew it was a lie, I also knew one thing with chilling certainty. He wasn't done. The ballroom was a sea of whispers, eyes, judgment. I felt the walls closing in, the chandeliers pressing down like they might crush me under their weight. Ethan sat tall beside me, basking in the chaos he had created, his smugness a performance tailored for every guest in the room. But somewhere in the storm of humiliation, a spark lit inside me. I wasn't going to let him bury me alive. I stood. The scrape of my chair against the marble floor silenced at least a few voices. Hundreds of faces turned toward me again. My throat burned, but I forced my voice steady. That's a lie. It wasn't loud, but it carried. The murmurs dimmed. Ethan tilted his head, lips curling. Really? He asked, theatrically, like a prosecutor baiting a witness. Shall we bring out the evidence? My heart pounded, but anger propelled me forward. Yes, I said, louder now. Show them. Show everyone what you have. Because I know the truth, you don't have anything. Gasps scattered through the crowd. For the first time that night, Ethan faltered, his eyes flickering, just briefly, before he masked it with another smirk. I scanned the room and saw Lila shifting uncomfortably. My gut told me she was in on it, but not all the way. If Ethan had proof, or even fabricated proof, she'd be reveling in it. Instead, she looked like someone afraid the floor might collapse beneath her. That was when I decided. If Ethan had chosen this stage to strike, I would use the same stage to fight back. I turned to the guests. You've all been so quick to believe a rumor tossed like a grenade into this night. But let me remind you, rumors are not facts. Accusations are not proof. And if anyone here has evidence of this so-called secret, then bring it out right now. Otherwise, let's call this what it is, a calculated lie, spoken to humiliate me. The room hushed. My voice echoed, stronger than I expected, steadied by rage. Ethan leaned back in his chair, clapping slowly, mockingly. Quite the speech, he sneered. But words won't save you. Maybe not, I thought. But truth might. I caught sight of my maid of honor, Hannah, standing near the back. Her face was pale, but she mouthed something I'll never forget. Check his phone. Hope flared. Hannah had been with me all day. She knew Ethan had been sneaking off, taking calls, sending messages. If I could just get my hands on that phone, maybe I'd find the cracks in his performance. I faced the crowd again. Ethan's been hiding something, that much is true. But it's not me who has secrets. It's him. The words rippled through the hall like an electric current. Heads swiveled. Gasps echoed. For the first time, Ethan wasn't fully in control. His jaw tightened, his hand curled around his glass until his knuckles whitened. I had turned the spotlight. Now, all I needed was proof to burn his lies to the ground. And I promised myself, before this night was over, I would find it. The room was teetering, half believing Ethan's poison, half holding its breath for what I might reveal next. I could feel the weight of 300 eyes drilling into me, waiting, hungry for blood or truth. Maybe both. Ethan leaned back in his chair, arrogance dripping from every movement. Secrets, he mocked. You really want to go down that path? Yes, I said, steady, though my heart raced. Let's talk about secrets. I turned toward Hannah. She hesitated only a second before crossing the room, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. In her hand was Ethan's phone, unlocked. She placed it in mine like a wee *P***N. Gasps rippled through the hall. Ethan's face drained of color, then flushed crimson. What the hell are you doing? He barked. I ignored him. My hands shook, but I scrolled quickly, guided by instinct more than anything else. And then, there it was. Dozens of messages, threads of conversations with numbers I didn't recognize. Pictures. Receipts. A string of voice notes, one of which I played aloud. The ballroom filled with Ethan's voice, tinny but unmistakable. She doesn't suspect a thing. Once tonight's over, I'll be free of her. Everyone will side with me, especially if we make her look unfaithful. Trust me, it's the perfect setup. A collective gasp echoed, sharp enough to cut the air. Guests clutched at their pearls, their ties, their wine glasses. Chairs scraped back as people stood for a better view. Ethan lunged for the phone, but I pulled away, holding it high. This is the truth, I shouted, my voice breaking with fury. He planned this. He staged it. All of it. Lila's composure shattered then. She stood abruptly, her voice trembling as she blurted, "It wasn't supposed to go this far." Her words were like gasoline on an open flame. The guests erupted. People shouted, cursed, demanded explanations. My parents rose, furious, while Ethan's parents tried to calm the chaos, their faces pale with horror. The DJ froze, the music forgotten, while servers stood rooted with trays of untouched champagne. And Ethan, my new husband, snapped. "You think this proves anything?" he roared, his mask fully gone. "They'll believe me over you. They always will." But he was wrong. Because in that moment, the tide had turned. The guests had heard his voice, seen his lies unravel in real time. The illusion he built so carefully was collapsing around him, brick by brick, lie by lie. Security, hired for the event, stepped forward when Ethan slammed his glass down, shards scattering. His rage boiled over, incoherent shouts spilling from his lips. For the first time all night, it was no longer me under the microscope. It was him, exposed, undone, burning under the same spotlight he tried to trap me in. And standing there, phone still in my hand, I felt something I hadn't felt all night. Power. The truth wasn't just out, it was undeniable. And though the battle had left me bruised, humiliated, and nearly broken, the final strike was his own. Because Ethan had orchestrated a public execution, and ended up condemning himself. The chaos of that night didn't end when the music stopped or the guests filed out in shocked silence. It lingered, like smoke after a fire, clinging to everything and everyone who had been in that ballroom. By morning, the story had spread. Guests posted fragments online, half-whispered recaps, blurry videos of Ethan lunging across the room, the audio of his voice note already making its rounds. By noon, the scandal was no longer contained to family and friends. It was everywhere. Ethan's family tried damage control, but it was too late. The carefully curated image of their perfect son crumbled. Sponsors pulled out from his fledgling business venture, investors vanished overnight, and colleagues stopped returning his calls. The man who had stood so tall at the altar was now reduced to desperate apologies and furious denials no one believed. As for me, I was left picking through the ashes of what should have been the happiest day of my life. My dress was still hanging in my closet, stained and torn at the hem, smelling faintly of roses and humiliation. For days, I couldn't look at it without shaking. But slowly, piece by piece, I began reclaiming myself. The annulment was swift, fueled by evidence Hannah helped me secure from Ethan's phone. Messages, recordings, the blueprint of his entire scheme laid bare. Even the court seemed stunned by the sheer cruelty of it. Within weeks, the marriage was dissolved, and Ethan faced lawsuits for defamation and fraud. But more than the legal victories, it was the small moments that mattered. My friends who never wavered, who stood beside me when I could barely stand on my own. My parents, who held me as I wept, reminding me that this nightmare did not define me. And Hannah, my maid of honor turned guardian angel, who refused to let me drown in his lies. Months later, I walked into a cafe near my apartment, and for the first time in a long time, strangers weren't whispering about me. They were just living, laughing, drinking coffee. I realized then that the silence I feared so much in that ballroom, the silence after Ethan's accusation, was nothing compared to the peace I felt in that moment. Ethan faded into the background of my life, a cautionary tale I refused to let dictate my future. The last I heard, he moved out of state, his reputation in ruins. Lila cut ties with him entirely, racked with guilt for playing even a small part in his scheme. And me. I chose to rebuild. Not with another wedding, not with some grand gesture, but with small steps. A new job, a new apartment, a new understanding of my own strength. Because here's what I learned, the silence that fell over that ballroom wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning. And if you ask me now what's the one wedding moment that left the entire room silent, I'd tell you this, it was the moment Ethan tried to destroy me, and ended up destroying himself instead.